right, so welcome back, of course, to the Barron Report. We are going to dive into something today I think that you guys are going to love, and that is all about sustainable packaging and the technology that is driving some of the innovation in the space. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. As you know, we dive into these kind of things, usually with CEOs, brand leaders, insights, and thought leaders around some of these topics. And with me today, I've got Mark Herrema, who is with a company called Newlight, but you've got a product that's very interesting, and the idea of Restore, kind of as a food product that's spun out of Newlight. Tell me a little bit about you and what you guys are doing there in terms of food packaging.
Yeah, so what we figured out how to do is make this material called AirCarbon, and AirCarbon is a really special material. It's actually produced by microorganisms from the ocean, and what they do is they consume in salt water air and greenhouse gas, whether from carbon dioxide or methane, and they build up this material inside their cells. The technical name is PHB. We call it AirCarbon. And when you extract it, it turns out that it's meltable. And because it's meltable, you can use it to replace plastic. But the big difference is because it's made throughout nature, it has a totally different end of life profile. Whereas synthetic plastics, the reason they never go away is because when they end up in nature, nature doesn't know what to do with them. The difference here is that because this material is produced throughout nature, in fact, it's made in the human body, it's made in plants and animals. Nature consumes it like a leaf or a twig, so it can be home compostable, industrial compostable, all these things that synthetic plastics can't do.
Yeah, for sure. Newlight, you guys have been around for a while. You're going into a few different categories in terms of, I saw some stuff around fashion, also plastics replacement. Where do you see kind of this whole approach going from Newlight as a company? Do you see other markets happening? What's kind of up for you guys in terms of the future?
Well, AirCarbon's a material that can just do so many things. We kind of got lucky on this. It turns out that this material that is made in nature, it just so happens to have a similar melting profile to polypropylene. And polypropylene is one of the largest polymers in the world. And so what that means is you can use AirCarbon for lots and lots of things, whether that's injection molding a chair, in the furniture space, or making parts for automotive. So what we had to do is say, okay, right now, it's going to take a while for us to keep building up our production capacity. Where can we have the most impact? Where can we bring the most value? And the two features that kind of stand out the most with AirCarbon is that, number one, you have a material that's been tested to be marine degradable. And so that means we can make parts and pieces that help address end-of-life problems. And so we said, okay, where can we leverage that? If you look at what's happening in ocean plastics, the pollution problem there, the majority of product types that end up in the ocean are related to food or foodware. And so we said we can use AirCarbon to help really address that problem. And that's why we moved into the foodware space. We developed a brand called Restore, which makes AirCarbon straws and AirCarbon cutlery, and we'll be rolling out a number of other products. But those, we think, can make a huge impact in helping address that problem. The other really important feature of AirCarbon is that it's got a net carbon negative footprint. So if you think about it, when this material is made in nature, in the ocean, they're using effectively, the renewable power and greenhouse gas that's around them. So you have a net carbon sink. We also use renewable power and sustainable greenhouse gas. So we're also a net carbon negative process. And so that's where fashion became really interesting to us, because we said, fashion is actually one of the most impactful in terms of its environmental impact, and we can use AirCarbon to help decarbonize that space. What's been interesting to us is even in the foodware space, whereas we thought the end-of-life features, the degradability, was going to be the most impactful for consumers, we're actually finding that the carbon impact is almost equally impactful. They want to not only reduce the amount of plastic that they use, but also reduce their carbon footprint. And AirCarbon allows them to do that. So fashion and foodware are really our first main focal points. But obviously we have ambitions to get into a number of other spaces as well.
With this material, kind of jumping away from the fashion foodware, you got me intrigued on the sense of being able to use this in other applications. How strong is the material once it goes into a forming process? Can you control the tensile strength or any of the, the composite ratios of whether or not it's going to bend or break in other applications? Kind of curious, how would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first, we look at the products we make. We believe that in order to create the kind of impact that we want to, we have to have scale. And to have scale, you have to have something that performs just as well as the products that people are used to. So if you think about why paper straws are not, why people aren't in love with paper straws is because they don't work that well. They work better for the environment, but they get soggy and they stick to your lips and all that stuff. And that means if you're a hardcore environmentalist, you shouldn't actually like paper straws because they harm the effort. They make people say, do we really care about this? So one of the great things about AirCarbon, and again, a lot of this was luck because this is just how nature made this stuff. But if you look at this fork here, this is made from AirCarbon. Mm-hmm. This is a really strong part. If you try to put it into lettuce or protein or whatever it is you're using it for, it's not one of those things that's too flimsy or too brittle. It's just really tough, strong stuff. And so that's super important. You take our straws, and they're also, they're great. They're smooth. They're ductile. It's everything that you liked and that was useful about plastics, except they go away like cellulose or a leaf or a twig in the environment. So performance-wise, it's got this really good baseline characteristic. But we also have the ability to mix it with other things. And that can give it a range from super tough and almost rigid to something far more flexible. This is my wallet made with AirCarbon leather, and this we go from maybe 10% elongation to 400% elongation. So it's got a pretty wide range of properties, and again, that's been both a blessing and a curse because you can go down a lot of avenues. We said let's first focus on where we can have the most impact, and foodware is absolutely a place where we think we can really make a difference.
Yeah, well, the numbers are definitely showing it. Just in the U.S., food packaging demand has been up over, I think it was 135% just this last year. With that kind of frequency, also when you're hovering around 250 billion different food occasions just in the U.S. on an annual period, the amount or opportunity, especially when we're seeing this ratio of about anywhere between 35 and 65% off premise, meaning I need some stuff to use for to go or foodware. So all of these kinds of demand scenarios are really increasing not only the production requirements of a lot of manufacturers and packaging, but just also obviously the consumer consumption of these things. When you see that kind of lift in the market, and you see the opportunities here in front of you guys right now. I think you guys did a deal with Chipotle. I think that might have been how we connected up with you.
Shake Shack.
Shake Shack. Okay, sorry, Randy Garuti, if you're listening to this. Shake Shack. So if you're going into brands like that, do you see this as, obviously it's a big opportunity, how fast can you move or scale into the food service market?
Well, what's really exciting to us is we just brought online our first fully integrated large commercial scale plant last year. And so now we have the ability to make a lot of product. And that's why we're now launching with partners like Shake Shack, and there's going to be some exciting announcements coming up in the next few weeks as well. So we expect to be in over 1,800 locations by the end of April. And all that says is we now finally, after so many years of work from developing the technology to progressively bigger and bigger scale, we now have the ability to scale. This commercial plant for us, we call it Eagle 3. In many ways, it was our solar panel, because from here going forward, we just add more of these plants. You can see what it looks like on our website at Newlight. But that's tremendously exciting for us and for our partners. What we see is that, and maybe some people would expect this, and maybe some people won't. I find that most brands actually really want to do good by the environment, but in order to do good by the environment, you also have to be able to sell your product, which means that they have to be good for people too. And so the reason we spent so long working on this tech is because we were excited by the fact that it represents this middle ground, this really important middle ground of products that aren't just good for the environment, but work really well for people. I mean, I love the guys doing wood cutlery, but I don't think any of us like that feeling of, sort of like you're going to get a splinter when you pull it out. I mean, it's funny. There's like this common currency wherever you go in the world, and you talk about how you hate paper straws. Like everybody's on the same page with that. These are products that they just kind of don't work. And in order to create scale, we have to have both sides of the equation. And so now we can finally deliver that to people. It's part of what is so exciting. When I went to the first the Shake Shack when they launched our AirCarbon straws and cutlery, part of the joy was just how non-eventful it was, in the sense that, wow, this is just something that works really well, and that's what we need to create scale.
Right.
So I think that there's definitely a very strong push, and you mentioned the sort of opportunity. It's a growing space. And that's a danger and an opportunity, right? I mean, the danger is that we just keep flooding the world with plastic. But in order to fix that, we have to deliver products that people actually like, that are also good for the environment. And that's what we think we're doing here.
Any opportunity here to go into, another big part of the business is the clamshell side of things for the packaging itself. These would almost be, depending, I guess, on how flexible the material would be, I could see some package design innovation that might make it, if you're making it for like these leather wallet type elements. I'm kind of curious, do you see this material being used in other actual food packaging, or do you think it's going to be more in the cutlery and the accessory side?
Short answer is all of the above. Our mission is we want to see ocean plastics accumulation ended in this generation. And our plan to do that is over the next 5 to 7 years, we're planning to roll out over 90% of the product types that end up in the ocean. So that includes things like clamshells and so forth. So AirCarbon can be used for packaging. What we're doing is sort of systematically rolling out our product types. We started with straws and cutlery, and over the next few quarters, you're going to see us roll out continually more and more parts of the foodware's end market and supply chain.
When you look at, let's kind of look down the future a bit, because there's a lot of different packaging designs I've seen, especially this last 6 months. A lot of innovation coming into the market, all sorts of things around reduction of materials, innovation in the material source itself, like what you guys are doing with AirCarbon. Any kind of trend that you're watching there at Newlight that you're really keeping your eye on in terms of global packaging opportunities that you could kind of see maybe in the next few years or next decade really kind of shift the way we think about packaging in general? Anything that you're watching as trends?
Well, I think reusability is a really emerging trend. That's a tough one because there is a role for single-use items, just from a hygiene perspective, if nothing else, in society. But then there's also a sort of cultural shift on people wanting to be more involved in reusability. So you're seeing more innovation in that space. You're certainly seeing downweighting, more of a push to paper. I think everything going kind of plastic free is just sort of a general trend, and going to natural materials, which is we think really important. And I think maybe the biggest trend is where does it start? And it starts with the consumer. The consumer is just the awareness level has gotten so much higher, where I think all of us now get to a point where if you're using a plastic fork, you feel it now, right? If you throw that thing in the trash, and now you know that it will never go away. And if you look at the recycling rates on this stuff, there was a great John Oliver piece that came out last weekend that talked about very, very little actual material is being recycled, and the stuff that is being recycled is generally downgraded, and so it's not a system that's working, and consumers recognize that, and they want to fix it, and so just as a trend, you're seeing companies that are benefiting by really getting ahead and showing their consumer that, hey, we care about more than just making money. We want to do good by you, do good by the world. And so I think there's been a dramatic shift over the past few years. And one of the things that was fascinating from my perspective, at least, was no one really knew what the pandemic was going to do to all this. I mean, we could have expected that single use would go up, but it wasn't clear if sustainability would become more of an afterthought. You know, is that is that a good economy sort of push? And would people say, "Hey, look, I got other problems to worry about"? We've seen the opposite, and I'm sure you have too. I think the pandemic, what it did was it demonstrated that we have these massive collective problems that require collective solutions, and they can come back and affect the world in a huge way if we don't deal with them. And so not only did we not see I mean, maybe in the very beginning, but net, it's hard up.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We've seen a lot of that just in the area. I mean, we cover a lot of things over on one of our other channels that are around, electrifying automation and all sorts of really innovation towards sustainability from a technology standpoint. So obviously with food, packaging is one of the biggest areas of waste that we have. Other areas in terms of electric use and even in general, trying to shift some of these facilities over to as much solar as possible. I do think that the industry is kind of going in that direction. I guess my question is in talking to a lot of the CEOs, it usually boils back down to either one, price. What's my cost for my paper goods packaging in the scenario that most food service operators look at? Is it efficient enough, or is the trade-off there? Unfortunately, I see a lot of them are thinking very short term versus long term, and maybe what someone like a Shake Shack and Randy's doing over there. They're a brand that's much more forward thinking, much further out in terms of how consumers perceive that. Do you find that to be the case in the food service space, or are you seeing some potential opportunities? In other words, could we find another 100 Shake Shacks? Because there's 3,000 of them out there in terms of multi-unit brands that could really make an impact here.
The short answer is yes. I do believe that, and we're seeing that, and you're going to see that in announcements coming up. But I think we have to be fair to these CEOs that I think a lot of them, again, do want to do good, but they also recognize that their customers don't like paper straws, and there's other sustainable materials that aren't that sustainable, and they recognize that, and they get feedback on that. And so I think, everybody collectively, we've got to come up with solutions that debottleneck, because absolutely, brands should care about price and performance. I mean, at the end of the day, they've got to be able to deliver products to people and have margins so that they can grow their businesses and provide great services to their customers. All of that is critical. We've always said that to be a hardcore environmentalist, you need to be a hardcore industrialist, because you can't just shout at the wind and say we must do this. Well, it's like, it's got to work, and it's got to make financial sense. And so, there is a demand there. What we spent a long time doing was figure out how we could unlock that demand, and so I think we're at the beginning of frankly a new wave. We've seen the electrification of vehicles be a wave. I think the sustainability of materials is going to be a massive push in the years ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing here, Mark, is materials science, because there's a lot of manufacturers out there that potentially are in the food service space and other kinds of packaging areas that we use for retail products and services. I guess with what you guys have done, I mean, you almost have kind of a format or a platform, so to speak, that could be used across the industry. Is there any plans on either one, I guess I won't say open sourcing, but giving what you've done with Newlight, being able to help the industry in a much bigger scale ability, maybe bringing more engineers in, other companies as partners, anything like that in brewing with what you guys are planning for the future?
Very much so. Last year, bringing Eagle 3 online was a big deal for us, because now we're going to be doing two things. One, we're going to be growing our production capacity as fast as we can. It's a major focus of mine in particular. But the other thing is a recognition that both the plastics industry is so massive and so much capital has been invested that it's going to take a long
Right.
time. So we can't get to the impact state that we want without working with partners. And we see collaborations, whether on joint venture or licensing or elsewhere, as a critical part of how we're going to address this thing at the scale that we want. And now that we have Eagle 3, this is now a again, sort of our solar panel where we can say, hey, if you want 5 of these. So that's going to now allow us to really debottleneck our ability to maybe not open source, but we would like to see a model where we do have a lot of collaboration and we move this thing as fast as we can.
Yeah. On Eagle 3, that's your manufacturing facility, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So with that facility, have you guys incorporated things like solar and any kind of additional attributes to keep low carbon footprints in general? How is your current manufacturing setup?
Oh yeah, that's been a huge area of focus for us. So everything that we do, we buy power off the grid and we buy RECs off the grid. So we're 100% renewable power. But we go much further than that. So we've had 2 independent life cycle analyses done on our process, one by SCS Global and the other by Carbon Trust, both calculating our material as net carbon negative. We have had our process accredited as a carbon credit generating process by Verra. And that was a 2-year effort to get that in place. And then all of that is tracked by an IBM blockchain system. I believe we're the first and I think only in the space where our whole production process is tracked by blockchain technology. And the reason we do that is so we have ultra verifiability on our carbon footprint. So that's a really, really important thing for us is making sure not only are we making this beautiful material in AirCarbon, but also we know with precision the carbon footprint, and then we can convey that to our customers.
Yeah. What does a facility look like, Eagle 1 or Eagle 3? Sorry. What does it look like? How big is it? Is it somewhat compact? Could we put a bunch of these around?
Yes. So we have a production facility in Huntington Beach, in Orange County, California, and you can see it on our website. Basically, what it looks like is a big, tall, 50-foot tall tank, and you can think of it like a little slice of the ocean. So we put saltwater, microorganisms from the ocean, and then they make AirCarbon inside their cells. Then we purify that, turn it into a powder and a pellet. And so as we grow, we're just basically going to be adding more of those vessels. So as we're now designing our subsequent facilities, you just see a tank farm of these of those systems. So at this point, it's a highly replicable process.
Is there any place, and I don't know the science behind this, but is there any place in our oceans with the vast amount of oceans that we have that are more rich and dense in how this material could be potentially farmed?
Well, one clarification: we don't farm microorganisms from the ocean. They were sourced originally, but once you have them, we just keep regrowing them over and over. Yeah. So we don't have to keep harvesting from the ocean.
Excellent stuff there. I think you guys are on the right kind of mission for sure, Mark. So first, congratulations and everything you're doing there. I can't wait to see more on Restore, especially as you hit more brands. So good luck to you out there in the food service side of things anyway. And it looks like you're on to some other stuff. So thanks for stopping in.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. Excellent stuff over here. Of course, if you guys are listening in over on the podcast, make sure and give us a rating, also a review. That's how we get feedback from you, our audience. If you're watching over on YouTube, make sure and smash the like. Subscribe to the channel. It's how we kind of dump this great content over to you, and we try to get as much out of as we can each week. On a lot of topics, as you'll start to see, our technology material is really starting to trend. So make sure and hit us up there as well. If you guys have an idea for a show here on the Barron Report, shoot us an email to producer@foodabletv.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on the Barron Report.